Hi, I'm Amanda Wilson. I'm 35, and last month I inherited my Uncle Richard's old Victorian house that my family immediately labeled a money pit. For that, they called me financially irresponsible and impractical. But the real hurt wasn't there, eye-rolling or dismissive comments. It was realizing they'd never actually respected Uncle Richard or anything he valued. That realization changed everything. Now my brother James is calling daily, texting about helping with renovations on the same house he once said should be demolished. But before I get to that part, where are you watching from today? Your apartment? On lunch break? Drop a comment below. You're about to hear the story my family never wanted me to tell. The first time I visited the house as its owner, I almost understood their concern. The once white paint had faded to a dirty gray. The yard looked like a small jungle with weeds climbing the porch railings. 3 crooked steps led to a massive wooden door with stained glass inserts. Beautiful, but clearly in need of repair. As I turned the heavy iron key in the lock, I felt equal parts excitement and dread. Inside wasn't much better. Dust covered everything. The layout was odd. Hallways that seemed to lead nowhere. Rooms with unusual alcoves, windows placed at strange heights. Yet somehow, beneath the neglect, I sensed something special. Craftsmanship you don't see anymore. Materials no one uses. Details that told a story. I hadn't told my family about the inheritance yet. Uncle Richard's lawyer had called me directly, which was surprising enough. Even more shocking was learning he'd left me, not my brother James, the successful real estate developer, his entire estate, including the Victorian on Maple Street. Why me? I'd asked the lawyer. Mr. Wilson said you were the only one who ever really listened to him, he'd replied simply. 2 days later, I broke the news at Sunday dinner. My parents' sleek suburban home couldn't have been more different from Uncle Richard's Victorian, everything modern, minimal, and perfectly maintained. Uncle Richard left me his house, I said during a pause in James's story about his latest property flip. The silence lasted exactly 5 seconds before James laughed. That old wreck on Maple? Why would he do that to you? What do you mean? I asked. It's a complete money pit, Amanda, James said, setting down his fork. I looked at it for a potential development 3 years ago. The foundation's cracked, the wiring's original, probably a fire hazard. It would cost more to bring it up to code than to tear it down and start over. His wife Heather, who handled the books for his company, nodded. At minimum, you're looking at $200,000 in critical repairs before it's even livable. Financial suicide for someone on an accountant's salary. You don't have to decide anything right now, my mother said, though her tone suggested otherwise. But perhaps James could help you list it before the next property tax bill comes due. My father nodded. Richard meant well, but that house has been deteriorating for decades. Best to cut your losses before it drains your savings. I stared at my plate, feeling that familiar twist in my stomach, the one that appeared whenever my practical, numbers-driven family made me doubt myself. I'd spent my entire career as an accountant measuring worth in columns and spreadsheets. But something about the house, about the way light filtered through those stained glass windows, spoke to me in a language I couldn't quite translate into dollars and cents. I think I'll take some time to go through things first, I said finally. Uncle Richard lived there for 40 years. There might be items of sentimental value. James rolled his eyes. Richard was a hoarder with eccentric tastes. Remember that? Weird art he used to talk about? All those books no one could read? He was certainly unique, my mother said diplomatically. As I drove home that night, their words echoed in my head. Uncle Richard had always been the family outsider, too intellectual, too interested in things they deemed impractical. And now, by accepting his gift, I was being placed in the same category. Still, as I pulled into my apartment complex, I found myself thinking not about their warnings, but about those stained glass windows and what mysteries might lie behind them. Have you ever had your family dismiss something important to you? What happened next would prove them all wrong. The following Saturday, I recruited my best friend Zoe to help explore the house. Unlike my family, Zoe, an elementary school art teacher, approached the Victorian with genuine curiosity. "This place is incredible," she said, running her fingers along the hand-carved banister. "They don't build houses with this kind of detail anymore." We moved room by room, opening windows to let fresh air circulate through spaces that had been closed for months since Uncle Richard's passing. The more we explored, the stranger the house revealed itself to be. "Amanda, look at this," Zoe called, from what appeared to be a study. She was pushing against a bookshelf that had swung outward, revealing a small hidden alcove. "It's like something from a mystery novel." Similar discoveries followed. A cabinet with a false back, oddly angled, skylights that cast precise patterns of light at certain times of day, built-in benches with hidden storage compartments. Every room seemed designed with specific intention, though the purpose wasn't immediately clear. "Your uncle wasn't just eccentric," Zoe said as we sat on the dusty floor eating the sandwiches we'd brought. "He was brilliant. This house is like a puzzle box." I smiled, remembering Uncle Richard from my childhood visits. He'd always had time for me, showing me his books on architecture and art, while the rest of the family dismissed his interests as useless. My parents would pick me up early, making excuses about Richard's instability and strange ideas. "He wasn't unstable," I told Zoe. "He just didn't care about the things they valued: money, status, practical careers." Dad always said Richard wasted his inheritance on books and travel instead of proper investments. In the master bedroom, we found a leather-bound journal in the nightstand. Richard's neat handwriting filled its pages with descriptions of art pieces, paintings, sculptures, prints, along with dates, names, and what appeared to be acquisition notes. "Listen to this," I said, reading aloud. "Acquired the Berman piece today. Significant risk given its history, but couldn't pass on the opportunity. With proper storage in the lower gallery, it should remain stable." "Lower gallery?" Zoe asked. "You think he means the basement?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. "James, have you thought more about selling?" he asked without preamble. "Property? Taxes will be due soon, and that place will be a serious drain on your finances." "I'm still going through things," I replied, watching Zoe examine a strange list we'd found tucked in the journal, columns of numbers and codes next to artist names. "Look, I can handle everything," James pressed. "My company could list it, no hassle for you. I know people who'd buy it as is, no inspections." "That's generous, but—" "By the way," he interrupted, his tone suspiciously casual, "have you been down to the basement yet? Any issues with water or foundation cracks?" Something in his voice made me pause. "Why do you ask about the basement specifically?" "Just concerned. Those old houses often have water problems." He cleared his throat. "Anyway, think about my offer. The sooner you unload that place, the better." After hanging up, I turned to Zoe. "That was weird. James never shows concern unless there's something in it for him. And suddenly he's specifically interested in the basement?" Zoe raised an eyebrow. "I'd be checking that out immediately." We found the basement door off the kitchen. Unlike the rest of the house with its ornate woodwork, this door was solid metal with a modern lock, recently installed from the look of it. "Definitely not original to the house," Zoe observed. The key was labeled in Richard's handwriting, "Gallery Access." We found more than just foundation issues behind that door. The basement had been transformed into a climate-controlled space with specialized lighting and storage systems. While most of the walls were empty, several archival boxes lined the shelves. In one, we found a photograph that made me gasp. Uncle Richard standing between two men I recognized from my art history elective in college. Famous artists whose works hung in major museums. Amanda, Zoe said slowly, I think your uncle was a serious art collector. Not just a guy with weird tastes like your family thought. I stared at the photograph, then back at the journal with its careful notations and inventory lists. The pieces were starting to fit together. The strange architectural features designed for specific lighting, the hidden storage areas, the climate-controlled basement. There might be more to this inheritance than a rundown Victorian, I said quietly. And I think my brother might already know it. I called in sick on Monday, then Tuesday. By Wednesday, I'd officially requested vacation time for the rest of the week. My boss at the accounting firm was surprised. I'd never taken unplanned time off in 7 years. But I couldn't focus on quarterly reports when Uncle Richard's house had become a mystery I needed to solve. The basement gallery held more secrets than I initially realized. What looked like a simple storage room had a false wall at the back. It took me hours of examining Richard's journal before I found the clue. A small diagram showing a pressure point mechanism hidden behind a thermostat case. When I pressed it, a section of wall slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. Beyond it lay a room I never could have imagined. Temperature and humidity monitors blinked from discrete corners. Special lighting fixtures were positioned strategically on tracks, and lining the walls were what appeared to be large storage panels. My hands trembled as I pulled out the first panel. Behind a protective covering was a painting, abstract shapes and vibrant colors that somehow conveyed both movement and emotion. The small brass plate on the frame read, Krasner, 1949. Panel after panel revealed more artwork. Paintings, drawings, prints. Some names I recognized, others I didn't. My art knowledge was limited to a college elective class. But even I could tell these weren't amateur works. Back upstairs, I spent hours researching names from Richard's inventory on my laptop. Lee Krasner, Jackson Pollock's wife, an important abstract expressionist in her own right. Mark Rothko, Willem de Kooning, artists whose works sold for millions at auction. Could these be genuine? It seemed impossible. How would Uncle Richard, who lived modestly in this old house, acquire such valuable art? I was still researching when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the window, I saw James's sleek BMW in the driveway. He wasn't alone. A man in a hard hat carrying a clipboard followed him up the walkway. I quickly closed my laptop and hid Richard's journal before answering the door. Surprise inspection, James announced, walking in without waiting for an invitation. This is Mike from Structural Solutions. Thought we should get a professional assessment of what we're dealing with. I didn't ask for an assessment, I said, watching as Mike immediately began examining the ceiling and walls. James lowered his voice. Amanda, be reasonable. This place is too much responsibility for someone with no renovation experience. Mike's company works with my development projects all the time. He'll give us a realistic picture of the costs involved. Us? I repeated. Figure of speech, he said quickly. It's your house, of course. I'm just trying to help. I followed them through the main floor, carefully steering them away from the kitchen and the basement door. James kept pointing out problems, outdated wiring, possible asbestos, foundation concerns, while Mike nodded and made notes. What about the basement? James asked as they finished their uninvited tour. It's locked. I lied. I can't find the key. James frowned. We should get a locksmith out here. Basement issues can affect the whole structure. After they finally left, I returned to the hidden gallery. Behind a built-in cabinet in the main gallery room, I found a false panel containing a leather portfolio. Inside was what appeared to be Richard's complete inventory, detailed information about each piece, including provenance, acquisition dates, and conservation notes. One entry caught my eye. Rothko study, 1956, acquired from Berman Estate, authenticated by Fleming Gallery, 2010, current market value estimate, 2.4 million. I nearly dropped the portfolio. $2.4 million for one piece? That evening, I called Nathan Peterson, an appraiser Zoe's friend at the City Gallery had recommended. I've inherited some artwork, I began cautiously. I'm not sure of its value, but it includes pieces possibly by Krasner, Rothko, de Kooning. Wait, he interrupted. You have works by these artists? Are they authenticated? There seems to be documentation. My uncle kept detailed records. Who was your uncle? He asked suddenly. Richard Wilson. The line went silent for a moment. Richard Wilson of the Maple Street house? The collector? You knew him? By reputation only. There were rumors in the art world about his collection. May I see the works as soon as possible? We scheduled an appointment for Friday. I was hanging up when my phone immediately rang again. My mother. We're having a family dinner this Sunday, she said, her tone making it clear this wasn't optional. We need to discuss your situation. My situation? James told us you've been camping out at Richard's house instead of going to work, and that you're refusing reasonable inspections of the property. I took vacation days, I said defensively. And I didn't refuse inspections. I just didn't request one. Darling, she sighed. This is exactly what happened with Richard. He got obsessed with that house and all those artistic notions. We just don't want to see you make the same mistakes. As I hung up, a text came through from James. FYI, talk to my friend at Westside Development. They might be interested in the lot. Good opportunity to get out from under this burden. We can discuss Sunday. The pieces were falling into place. James wasn't concerned about my financial welfare. He wanted the house, or more specifically, he wanted to broker its sale to developers. The question was, did he know what was hidden inside? Sunday dinner loomed ahead. But first, I had an appointment with an art appraiser that might change everything. Part 4. The Breaking Point. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always followed the same script. Mom's carefully prepared meal, Dad's selected wine, James dominating the conversation with his latest business success. But tonight, knowing what I now knew about Uncle Richard's collection, the familiar routine felt suffocating. Amanda, you've barely touched your lamb, Mom noted as I pushed food around my plate. Sorry, I murmured, just thinking. About the house, I hope, Dad said. It's been 2 weeks now. James set down his wine glass with purpose. Actually, I have good news on that front. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. I've spoken with Trevor at Westside Development. They're prepared to make an all-cash offer on the property. He slid a document across the table. The figure, $380,000, seemed to hover on the page. That's significantly above market value for a teardown, James continued. Normally they'd offer much less given the condition, but I convinced Trevor it's a special situation. That's generous, I said carefully. Mom nodded enthusiastically. It's a wonderful opportunity, Amanda. You could pay off your student loans and still have enough for a down payment on a proper condo. A proper condo? I repeated. Something in a good area, Dad explained as if I were a child. Low maintenance, good investment potential. I know. What a proper condo is, I said, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. I'm just not sure I want to sell yet. James sighed dramatically. Amanda, be reasonable. You're an accountant, not a contractor. This restoration is beyond your capabilities. The phrase struck a nerve. Beyond your capabilities. I'd heard variations of it my entire life, when I wanted to study art history. That's beyond your earning potential. When I considered starting my own bookkeeping business. That's beyond your experience level. Always the practical path. Always the safe choice. Always knowing my limitations. I'm not planning to restore it myself, I said. I've been going through Uncle Richard's belongings. That's another thing, Mom interrupted. James says you've been holed up there for days. It's not healthy to obsess over Richard's collections. The way she said collections, like it was a symptom of mental illness. There are some interesting items, I said neutrally. I'm having someone look at them. A junk appraiser? James laughed. Richard filled that place with odd artwork no one would want. If only he knew how wrong he was. Nathan Peterson, the art appraiser, had nearly dropped his phone when I described just 3 pieces from the collection. His preliminary assessment, based solely on photos I'd sent, suggested several works could be not just valuable, but historically significant. The development offer expires Tuesday, James pressed. I've already scheduled contractors to do final assessments tomorrow. You what? I looked up sharply. You don't have authority to schedule anything at my house. I'm expediting the process, James said dismissively. The sooner we get this wrapped up, the better for everyone. I haven't agreed to sell, I reminded him. Dad leaned forward. Amanda, this isn't like you. You've always been the practical one. No, I interrupted. I've always been the compliant one. There's a difference. Honestly, James said, I don't know why Richard left you that house anyway. He always said I had the best head for property value. We'd discussed me handling his estate when the time came. And there it was, the real issue. James had expected to inherit the house. He'd probably been making plans for it for years. Maybe. He left it to me because I actually listened to him, I said quietly. Because I saw him as more than just a property owner or a potential inheritance. Well, regardless, James said, pulling out another document, I've had my company prepare the preliminary sales paperwork. All you need to do is sign, and we can transfer everything to the developers. My team will handle the details. Something inside me snapped. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, and managed crystallized into a sudden, clarifying anger. No, I said, my voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. No what? James looked up, surprised. No, I'm not signing your paperwork. No, I'm not selling to your developer friends. No, I'm not going to let you schedule contractors at my house. And no, I'm not going to sit here and be treated like I'm incapable of making my own decisions. The silence around the table was absolute. Amanda, Mom began. All my life, I continued, standing up slowly, I've been the reasonable one, the practical one, the one who knows her limitations. I followed the safe path, the accounting degree instead of art history, the corporate job instead of my own business. I listened when you all told me what I couldn't do, shouldn't try, wouldn't be capable of handling. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. Uncle Richard was the only person who ever asked me what I wanted, what I thought, what I saw when I looked at a painting or a building. And now I understand why he left me that house. Not because I'm the best at assessing property values, but because he trusted me to see its true worth. You're being dramatic, James scoffed. I'm being honest, I corrected. For the first time in years, that house isn't just a structure, and Uncle Richard wasn't just an eccentric old man with strange hobbies. There's more to this inheritance than any of you understand, and I'm not going to let you dismiss it, or me, anymore. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Where are you going? Dad called. To my house, I replied. I have an appraiser to call. As I pulled out of their driveway, my hands were still shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. For the first time in my life, I'd spoken my truth without filtering it through what my family wanted to hear. I drove straight to Uncle Richard's house, my house now, and called Nathan Peterson. Can you come first thing tomorrow morning? I asked. I need to know exactly what I've inherited before my brother tries to take it away from me. Nathan Peterson arrived at 8 the next morning. He wore a crisp button-down shirt and carried specialized equipment in a leather case, magnifying tools, a portable UV light, a high-resolution camera. His professional demeanor slipped the moment I led him to the hidden room. "My God," he whispered, surveying the storage panels. "It's true." I watched as he carefully extracted the first artwork, the Krasner painting I'd discovered. His gloved hands moved with reverent precision as he examined the brushwork, the canvas, the frame construction. "Original," he confirmed, almost to himself. "Mid-century, excellent provenance documentation." He looked up at me, eyes wide. "Do you understand what you have here?" Over the next 3 hours, Nathan's excitement grew with each piece we examined. His camera clicked constantly, his notes became more extensive, and occasionally he would simply stand in silent appreciation before a particularly significant work. "This Rothko study," he said, examining a canvas of luminous rectangular forms, "was thought to be destroyed in a fire in the 1960s. The art world has been speculating about its existence for decades." "How would Uncle Richard have acquired something like that?" I asked. Nathan carefully returned the Rothko to its protective covering. "From what I can piece together from these records, your uncle had connections to the abstract expressionist movement through his work at the Berman Gallery in the 1960s. He appears to have quietly acquired these works when many were still considered controversial or commercially unsuccessful. He showed me entries in Richard's meticulous ledger. See these notations? He was rescuing works by artists who were being persecuted or overlooked. Jewish artists during times of anti-Semitism, women artists in a male-dominated field, politically controversial figures. In a hidden compartment of Richard's desk, we found a sealed envelope with my name on it. Inside was a letter written in his familiar, neat handwriting. "My dear Amanda," it began. "If you're reading this, you've discovered what I've dedicated my life to preserving. While others saw only financial potential in my inheritance, I chose to invest in art that spoke truth, works created by brave souls who were silenced, marginalized, or persecuted. I've left this collection to you because you were the only one who ever truly looked at these works with wonder rather than assessment, the only one who asked what they meant rather than what they cost. Trust your eye, as I have always trusted it. With love, Richard." Tears blurred my vision as Nathan gently laid a hand on my shoulder. "Ms. Wilson, based on my preliminary assessment, this collection is worth approximately $12 to $15 million, possibly more if the Rothko and de Kooning pieces authenticate, as I believe they will." The number seemed impossible. $15 million. Hidden in plain sight in a house my family had dismissed as a worthless money pit. My moment of reckoning came sooner than expected. As Nathan was photographing a particularly significant Motherwell piece, I heard car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I saw James's BMW, my father's Mercedes, and behind them, a van marked Westside Development. "They're here," I said quietly. "Do you want me to leave?" Nathan asked. "No. Stay exactly where you are. I met them at the door before. They could knock." "Amanda," James began with forced cheerfulness. "Good news. Trevor from Westside is here with the final offer. Even better than we discussed. All we need is your signature and—" "No," I said simply. James blinked. "You haven't even heard the price." "It doesn't matter what the price is. I'm not selling." My father stepped forward. "Amanda, be reasonable. We're trying to help you avoid a costly mistake." Actually, I said, stepping aside to reveal Nathan carefully documenting a small sculpture, I'm avoiding selling a $15 million art collection for the price of a teardown. The silence was absolute. James's face drained of color. My father's mouth opened and closed without sound. Trevor from Westside Development looked utterly confused. 15 million? My father finally managed. Preliminary estimate, I confirmed. Uncle Richard was a significant art collector and preserver. These works are museum quality, historically important, and extremely valuable. But, James stammered, why wouldn't he tell the family about this? He tried. For years, you all dismissed his useless interests and weird art without ever actually looking at what he was showing you. My mother, who had been silent, suddenly stepped forward. Well, this changes everything. We should discuss as a family how to handle such valuable assets. After all, Richard made his wishes perfectly clear. I interrupted, holding up his letter. He left everything specifically to me, with detailed documentation and a legally binding will, because I was the only one who showed genuine interest in what mattered to him. James's shocked expression hardened. This isn't right. The family should have equal say in assets of this magnitude. I'll be contacting our attorney. Feel free, I said calmly. Richard's lawyer provided me with extensive documentation anticipating exactly this reaction. Every piece is inventoried, authenticated, and legally bequeathed to me alone. Amanda, my father tried again. Let's not be hasty. I think you should all leave now, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. I have an appraisal to finish and a collection to secure. This isn't over, James warned as they reluctantly moved toward the door. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. On my terms, not yours. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in my life, I stood firmly in my own power. No longer the accommodating daughter or the overlooked sister, but the rightful heir to a legacy built on seeing true value where others saw nothing. The months following Nathan's appraisal unfolded like a time-lapse sequence in a film. Yellow tape marked areas for restoration. Scaffolding appeared, then disappeared. Specialists in period architecture worked alongside art conservators. The Victorian gradually shed its neglected appearance as I shed my former life. Curators from major museums arrived with reverence, examining pieces with gloved hands and hushed voices. The Rothko study authenticated, worth even more than initially estimated. The de Kooning confirmed as a pivotal early work. Each verification added not just monetary value but historical significance to Uncle Richard's collection. I learned the house itself had been designed with the art in mind. Those strange windows precisely positioned for optimal natural light on specific pieces. The odd alcoves sized for particular sculptures. Richard had created a private museum, its architecture serving the art it contained. My corporate cubicle grew distant in my memory as I immersed myself in Richard's world. I studied his journals, piecing together how a young gallery assistant had recognized genius in artists, others overlooked, quietly building a collection that chronicled an entire art movement. I discovered letters between Richard and the artists, friendships, philosophical discussions, shared ideals about beauty and truth. When the Museum of Modern Art offered a 7-figure sum for the Krasner painting, I called my boss at the accounting firm and resigned. The certainty in my voice surprised us both. I'm pursuing another opportunity, I explained, knowing no further details were needed. The Victorian Museum offered me a consulting position as I worked to catalog Richard's collection. The irony wasn't lost on me. My impractical interest in art history had become my livelihood. Richard had seen this potential in me long before I recognized it myself. My family's approach changed as news of the Wilson collection spread through art circles. My father called with investment advice for the proceeds should I sell pieces. My mother invited me to lunch at her country club, casually mentioning her bridge friends were fascinated by my new career. James attempted reconciliation by sending articles about art market trends, positioning himself as a potential advisor. I established clear boundaries, welcoming genuine interest while deflecting attempts to manage or control. When my mother expressed sincere curiosity about Richard's collection, I gave her a private tour. When James suggested setting up a family foundation to handle the art, I politely declined. "I respect that this is your inheritance," my father said during a carefully neutral dinner. "Richard clearly saw something in you that perhaps the rest of us missed." It was as close to an apology as he would ever come, and I accepted it with the same grace. The Victorian, now restored to its proper splendor, became both my home and the headquarters for my new life. I established the Richard Wilson Foundation for Overlooked Artists, using proceeds from selective sales to fund scholarships and exhibitions. For the first time in my life, I made choices based not on practicality or others' expectations, but on what resonated with my own sense of purpose. The money pit had transformed into a wellspring of possibility, just as Uncle Richard had intended all along. 1 year after Nathan Peterson first walked into Uncle Richard's hidden gallery, I stood in the center of the Victoria Museum's main exhibition hall. Around me, elegantly dressed patrons admired selected works from the Wilson collection, displayed for the first time to the public. The exhibition, Hidden Visions, The Richard Wilson Legacy, had already garnered national attention. I watched as young art students sketched in corners, studying the masterpieces Richard had preserved. Through the Richard Wilson Foundation, 3 of these students had received scholarships to pursue their artistic education, continuing the cycle of recognizing talent where others might not see it. My father approached slowly, studying the information, placard beside a particularly striking Motherwell. "I never really looked at them before," he admitted quietly. When Richard would talk about his important acquisitions, I always assumed he was exaggerating. He turned to me, his expression uncharacteristically humble. "I was wrong. About the art, about Richard, about you." Those simple words, "I was wrong," meant more than any elaborate apology could have. As the evening concluded, I found myself alone in front of the Krasner painting, the first piece I'd discovered in Richard's hidden room. What had initially appeared to be just colorful shapes now revealed itself as a complex statement about freedom and constraint, visibility and invisibility. Uncle Richard's true gift wasn't the $15 million collection, though that had changed my life. His real legacy was showing me how to trust my own vision, to see value where others saw only cost, to recognize beauty obscured by dust and doubt. Have you ever discovered something valuable that others overlooked? Share your story below, and if you found meaning in my journey, subscribe for more stories about finding your worth when others fail to see it. Because sometimes, what the world dismisses as a money pit contains treasures beyond price. You just need the courage to look deeper.